This is the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, show 96. An entrepreneur's success starts with a healthy marriage with Alex and Cadey Charfen.
For the people who are in a marriage where you know it's the right marriage for you, you know you're with the right person, you have achieved together, here's the bottom line. If you can't convince your spouse of an idea, you're probably doing something dumb. And if you're hiding it from your spouse, you're absolutely doing something dumb.
Yes. Hi, Ariana here with a quick PSA about why this topic is so important to us. Tom and I know how challenging it can be to start and run a business, to take care of your loved ones, and on top of it all, to keep a healthy relationship with your spouse. It isn't easy, and that is why we created our Lifestyle Builders Mentorship Program. As a special offer during this very special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. So if you, and your spouse is welcome too, need more strategy, support, and guidance in your business and life, plus people who truly care about you and will keep you accountable, sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the code LBcouples. All right, a little bit more about today's special guests on our Couples and Entrepreneurship episode. Alex and Cadey are the co-founders of Charfen, a training, education, and membership organization for entrepreneurs and small businesses. For the past 2 decades, Alex has created and curated proven business philosophies, models, and strategies geared specifically to entrepreneurs. An expert in business growth, having personally consulted for billionaires, the Fortune 500 and Global 100 companies, Alex is invited to share his strategies with business owners around the world and often speaks on his idea of the entrepreneurial personality type, the EPT. Cadey ran operations and scaled the company as revenues grew from 0 to over $10 million a year. With Cadey leading the team, Charfen grew over 8,000% in 3 years, which gained them attention and awards from major media and news outlets. Alex and Cadey reside in Austin, Texas, with their 2 daughters, Reagan and Kennedy. All right, this episode was one that we have been waiting to record for months. We were so excited to have Alex and Cadey come on the show. They just shared so much wisdom and so much of their personal stories and experiences. And it was all great stuff. I can't even pick a favorite part.
Yeah, well, and we met Alex earlier this year, and from the moment I started talking to him, I knew that he was someone very similar to me, and there's not a lot of us out there. Mm-hmm. And when I say us, it's the people that work with businesses that understand not only how to build successful businesses and have experience in it, but also focus on the marriage and the relationship.
Yes.
And you guys are going to hear how clear, like it comes through multiple times in this episode.
Obviously, we picked it as a title.
Yeah, it's like, take care of the marriage, and that's going to lead to success in the business. And the fact that just came through, and we had so many good conversations around that.
So many good things. I think I won't give it away as a spoiler, but I did have one moment in the show that I called a light bulb moment for me. And now I'm going to be talking about that all the time.
Yeah, well, and I know that you guys listening to this, you're going to have light bulb moments too, because there's so much good content in here in the short amount of time that we chatted, that if you truly listen, take this to heart, and apply it to your life and business, it will change it and really push you into momentum.
Yeah. Ooh, good word choice. Momentum. You'll see why at the end of the show. And with that, we'll let you guys enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome back to another special episode of the Lifestyle Builders Podcast. We are in a Couples and Entrepreneurship series, and we're so excited to have Alex and Cadey Charfen on with us today. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show.
We're excited to be here. Thanks, Ariana.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And we've talked to so many different couples, and I think you guys bring a very unique perspective with just all the background and ups and downs and everything that you guys get into. So starting out, I know from like us talking in the past that you've gone top of the top with building very large businesses, then dropping down with bankruptcy, shifting markets. So just give us a little bit of an overview of like, how did things start and what did that path look like to get to where you are today?
When did it start for us together?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we met 15 years ago, and at the point where we met, I was running a large international consultancy with offices in the U.S. and Latin America. I was also traveling about 90% of the time, And up until that point, I was pretty cool with it, but I had started to get tired of it. And when I met Cadey, it became really clear that like Cadey was a flight attendant. So I was traveling a ton, she was traveling a ton, and we were starting this relationship where we basically saw each other in passing, and it didn't work. So within probably about 6 weeks of us, well, we didn't really date or anything. So
we kind of met and then moved in together.
Yeah.
Like 2 months later.
I love it.
Yeah.
So within six weeks of like really 6 weeks or 8 weeks of us moving in together, I started trying to sell the consultancy. It took a while. It was about 2 years to get it all like transferred over and moved out of that business completely. But I immediately started trying to get out of it. And the main motivation for that was it didn't feel like we were in a relationship. It felt like, we were kind of roommates and working. And so selling that business, I actually thought I was going to retire. It was like the worst 6 weeks of my life. Retirement was not awesome. And
either one of us,
no,
by
it was
the way.
horrible.
I was like, you've got to go do something.
It was horrible. I started out of boredom. I started buying houses. I did pretty well on the exit of that business. So out of boredom, I was like, literally, I'm going to go do something. And I started buying houses. Like, talk about an expensive habit. And, so we started buying houses together, and we started renting some of them, flipping some of them. And like, that was my kind of quote unquote retirement plan. It was the early 2000s. And within probably a year, we were the largest home buyers in South Florida. We were doing like somewhere between, on a slow month, 5 deals, on a really busy month, somewhere between 10 and 20 deals a month.
Just a small side hobby, right?
That was my hobby. And we built a huge real estate business. Unfortunately, we built it in the early 2000s. So we went from well over 8 figures in wealth and equity to flipping upside down in the year 2007. From 2006 to 2007, we went from making, easy 6 figures a month consistently and having at least 8 figures in equity and cash in the bank to being upside down about $1 million about $900,000 in 9 months. So the swing was over 10 mil. But then by the end of 2007, or by the middle to the end of 2007, we went from being upside down like 900,000 to multiple millions. Like, it just caved in. We had properties that lost 90% of their value.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there's this whole thing in real estate investing circles where they're like, buy property because it never goes away. That's totally not true. We had properties that actually went away. Like, permanently.
Like, permanently condemned.
And wiped off the face of the earth. And so, yeah, it was brutal.
So how do you guys, you go from meeting, you go through the experience of selling the business, you start this other one, riding high, and then everything drops out and you have that huge swing. Like, how do you guys mentally deal with that, and what impact did that have on the relationship?
I think at first, I think that when there's financial challenges, we had specialized when we were in real estate with helping homeowners who were facing foreclosure. And so we had seen it over and over and over again, although we hadn't experienced it ourselves. We experienced it several times during that downturn. But, I think that, the tendency is to start like blaming each other and to start fighting, and you should have done this differently, and you should have done this differently.
I agree. It's totally your fault.
And I would be lying if I said that we didn't go through that period where it was like, we should have made different decisions, or like, if you would have done this differently. And it was about probably 3 or 4 days. Yeah. And then we were like, okay, we've got to get through this together. And then I would say that in hindsight, after the bankruptcy and after all of that had cleared, it was the strongest our marriage had ever been up to that point. And it was really a huge learning experience and set a trajectory for us to, achieve the level of success that we have afterwards, because it not only changed the way that we rely on each other and the way that we know that we can get through really hard things together, but it also changed our the way that we view our finances and our relationship with money. And, we really actually treat that as a relationship now. And it's something that we always have a pulse on together, and we're setting, outcomes and goals around it together. And so I think in hindsight, it definitely made us stronger.
Yeah, it was rough though. I think one of the things, I know one of the things that got us through that time, here's like the play-by-play of what happened. We were watching the South Florida real estate market implode. We always knew our numbers. I've been running businesses since I was like a kid, like under 18 years old. And so I always knew like watching your numbers is something you need to do. So I was checking in with Katie on a daily basis, like, hey, we lost $500,000 yesterday. Hey, we lost like $1.1 million yesterday. It was daily, huge drops. And there was a period where the Wall Street Journal was publishing the top 10 fastest depreciating zip codes in the United States. And we owned property in 4 of the top 6. Oh. So it was like, I remember when we were building up our real estate business, my mom once said, she was like, hey, don't you think you need to diversify a little bit? And I was like, Mom, diversify? We have houses, condos, apartments, duplexes, triplexes, totally diversified. And she's like, but don't you think something could happen? And I'm like, Mom, if something happened to the real estate market enough for it to affect us, it would be front page news. Like, no kidding. It was front page news. Yeah. And when we finally went in to declare bankruptcy, it was like the weirdest conversation we've ever had, or at least up to that point I had ever had. It was like, what we're going to do is pay someone so that we can publicly and very officially declare we are massive financial failures. And that's what it felt like. Even though the market took us out, even though there was this unprecedented time in the history of the world, it still felt like being massive financial failures. So for like Katie said, the first 3 or 4 days, like we barely talked. We just kind of walked around the house pretending like we were working. I remember going into my office and being like, I'm going to get something done today. And then it would be like 3 o'clock and I hadn't done anything. And it was just like, I couldn't get focused. I couldn't really figure out what to do. But during that period of time, I remember us having a conversation. Like, I remember saying, hey, we're not going to get jobs, right? I'm not going to get a job. You're not going to get a job. And I'm like, we've got to figure something out to fix this. And so Katie took over what was left of our real estate business, and it was not doing well, but there was still some money coming out of it and very little. And then I started writing an information product. But I think what was most grounding in that time was Katie came up with rituals that we had to do. And one of the rituals was every night we had to say 3 things we were grateful for. And dude, there were nights where Katie would be like, okay, let's do our gratefuls. And I'd be like, F grateful. I'm not grateful. I'm pissed, but because she was super persistent, and we were sleeping in the same bed and I didn't want her mad at me, we would do that. And I really, entrepreneurs ask me all the time, what's the secret to success? And to me, it's your daily habits and rituals. You can have any type of dream you want, but if you're not putting it into action in the right way every single day, it's not going to come true. And that was a huge one for us. So much so that, we have a product called the Momentum Planner, and every day, anybody who uses a momentum planner writes down what they were grateful for and where did they win, because it's so grounding and so motivating, even when you're at the worst of times, especially when you're at the worst of times.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there was a quote that so I played sports in high school, and there was a quote that a coach had said that just stuck with me. And it was, championships are not won on the night of the big game, but years before by athletes that dedicate themselves to championship principles daily. And that just stuck with me. And to your point, it's been those habits and routines that I know have gotten, me and I think us through those ups and downs that we've gone through too.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like that we've noticed a lot in our relationship and with others is that when you go through those tough times, it's so easy to blame. And a lot of times what couples will do is turn away from each other and start having it like that competition, where it seems like what you guys were able to do pretty quickly in a couple of days was then start turning towards each other and realizing we are a team and we're going to get through this together, but it's going to require both of us to kind of be on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's this coaching that I give people, right responsibility and then right blame, put a line in between the two and just live above the line. And if you want to be successful, that's how you have to do it. And when we first were going bankrupt, we were blaming everybody, the banks, the market, the government. Like, I mean, I was trying to deflect as much as I could. And then I remember Katie and I sitting down and I was like, hey, we screwed some stuff up here. We didn't have enough reserves. Even though we were more conservative than anyone we knew, we had huge reserves and huge equity. People used to tell us we weren't aggressive enough all the time. Which would have just made everything worse.
Yeah.
But we started saying like, hey, there's responsibility for us to take here. And if we take responsibility, we're going to be able to get out of this. So when we declared bankruptcy, it was like the best bankruptcy anybody's ever declared. We're like, we're going to win at going bankrupt.
Our attorneys were like, they give you this list of all of these items that you have to bring in. And we like obsessed over this paperwork. And we brought these, they were like 4-inch.
We had 5 4-inch binders
of like all of our entities, all of our paperwork, all of the bank statements, all of the things, and they were like, wow, like this is amazing. And we were like, well, this is what you told us to do. They were like, yeah, but nobody actually really does that.
We turned in 4,700. It was 4,700 sheets of paper. It was like 9.5 reams of bankruptcy.
We're even winning at bankruptcy.
I was gonna say, if we're gonna go bankrupt, we're gonna go bankrupt right.
We're gonna go bankrupt the right way. Well, and Tom, I'm glad we did. We had done so much in real estate and so much so fast in real estate that when we went to see the trustee, walking in, he thought we had committed fraud. And had we not had those books, because every question he had, I pulled out a book, went right to the page, put it in front of him. And it ended up like going from, I think this is going to be a fraud investigation, to about 45 minutes later, him saying like bankruptcy approved, and we were ready to go. And so I'm glad that we did do all that work.
We did live in the fraud capital of the country in South Florida. So I think that most like judges and attorneys just see it.
They just assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are parents. Where did the kids come into the picture in this timeline?
Reagan was born, and then actually we ended up, Alex had kind of alluded to the fact that he started creating a information product. And that information product was called the CDPE, the Certified Distressed Property Expert. And that ended up being the first information product that we had ever written, and our largest actually still to date. And over the course of from 2008 to 2013, we trained real estate agents, because I was a real estate agent at the time. And we started getting calls from realtors like, hey, and we specialized in foreclosure even in the height of the market. So we started getting these calls. Hey, I know that you specialize in this. I don't even want a referral fee, but my client's upside down. I don't know how to help them. We just want you to help them. And so we quickly realized like we can't individually help every single person in South Florida. And there's a need for this because this is a national crisis, right? And so Alex went and created the CDPE, the Certified Distressed Property Expert, wrote a product based on, the work that we had done up to date and helping people who were facing foreclosure. And we trained real estate agents to do the same, to help people who are facing foreclosure, to understand their options, to really be an ally, and, to walk them through a really stressful time in their life. And, the tagline for that product ended up being solving the foreclosure crisis one homeowner at a time. And we actually did that. We trained nearly right under 50,000 agents over the course of that time period. We partnered with most of the major lenders, most of the major brokerages, the U.S. government, the U.S. Treasury, to write, documents, and
the Treasury, the FHFA, a whole bunch of
departments. And so our little tiny team that ended up, we say tiny, but it ended up being about 90 people here in Austin. We have the U.S. Treasury, the woman from the U.S. Treasury on video saying that our little course pulled the foreclosure crisis forward 4 to 5 years.
She said 5 to 7 in case anybody ever sees it.
Oh, okay.
I had to go back and look at it. I'm like, man, I got to get clear on what she said. I quote it way too often. I don't quote it wrong.
And so really what ended up being like really catastrophic for us personally turned into, this enormous impact that we were able to have, not only for ourselves, but like the ripple effect that saving homeowners from foreclosure causes, you know, in the country and really around the world is pretty amazing. And so we're really proud of it.
So the kids came in. Reagan was born already as we were going through the bankruptcy process. She was about a year old. Oh. At one point, we were getting served with lawsuits so often because we had so much property that Reagan knew the name of the process server. I remember I opened the door one day and she's like, "Hi, Pam." And I'm like, "Oh, crap." Like, I can't believe my kid knows the name of the process server. I'm like signing lawsuit documents. And then we started the CDP designation in bankruptcy. In fact, when we taught the first course, January 27th and 28th, 2008, we hadn't paid for the hotel room. Wait, was it January 27th or 28th or 23rd and 24th? 23rd and 24th. We hadn't paid for the hotel room. Like we were waiting to bill the people in the class to be able to pay for everything. But in that first year, we trained 1,500 agents and Katie got pregnant with Kennedy. So we ended up with an exploding company and 2 little kids. And we went from bankruptcy to within 12 months of discharge, we were back to liquid millionaire status. And within our first year of eligibility, we were number 21 on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing companies.
Wow.
But we cheated. I mean, we had like a long, you know, I had a long history as a consultant. And so we used all our own content. Everything that we do today to teach people how to grow fast, we used exactly what we trained today.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we first met, that was really, to be honest, what attracted me to you was very similar background, like real estate, consulting for organizations for a long time. And what I saw was that a lot of consultants really just didn't know what they were doing, or it was all theory, but it hadn't actually applied in business. And I remember when we were chatting the first time and I was just listening to you talk, it was like you'd say something and then Ariana would like punch me because it's like something we do. Or you'd say another thing.
I would poke him. Like, that sounds like you.
But it was just so refreshing because I think there's very few people I come across that really understand what it takes to put a team together, put operations together to scale a business like that. And it was just so refreshing hearing you kind of talk about that.
Thanks, Tom.
The other thing I know that you talk about is this EPT, this entrepreneur personality type. Like, can you give us a quick background on what that is?
Sure. To give it to you in the most concise way that I can, you know, I believe that there is a different personality type in the world that is the entrepreneurial personality type. I think that when you look at most people in the world, they aren't like us. They're actually in many ways opposed to us. And there's this small population on Earth today that is the population that goes out into the future, creates a new reality, comes back to the present and insists that it becomes real. And we can't turn it off. And we don't act like the rest of human beings. In fact, a lot of the rules that apply to everybody else, like psychologists say there's extrinsic or intrinsic motivation and that you have to have one or the other. Not for EPTs. We're just motivated. Like, you can't turn it off. You can't make it go away. And the way I look at it is we are evolutionary hunters. You know, when you look at the human population, there is a small group that has always kept the human tribe alive. And it's the people who get up every day and say, what happens if I go over that mountain, or try something new, or trade in a different way, or talk to somebody else, or, you know, make something new or invent something. And it's not everybody. You know, the rest of the world is looking forward to the day where they can do nothing. And to the entrepreneurial personality type, a day where they don't accomplish enough feels like a failure. And so that's like the foundation for most of our work today. I think it was probably 4 years ago when I first wrote that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sat down to write a book called Constructive Company about how to run a business. And I got to the section where you have to write about who's going to buy the book. And I couldn't write it. I remember, like, it was the most frustrating writing experience for me. I couldn't write about entrepreneurs. And I remember I got up and like got away from the computer. I went and talked to Katie. I got a glass of water. I came back. And in a weekend, I wrote about 25,000 words. And it ended up becoming the entrepreneurial personality type book.
Very nice. Yeah. And I remember, like, so with our background, basically when I got out of college, I looked ahead and I was like, that's not the path I want for us. So I just set this goal of like retiring by 35. Really didn't know what that meant. But I remember, like, a couple years into it, I had a mentor that was like, Tom, quit saying you're going to retire, because I know you're not going to stop. Like, what you are really looking for is you want the freedom and the options to make a bigger impact. He's like, you're never going to stop doing what you're doing. It might just look different. And yeah. I was like, you know, that was such a big kind of aha for me, where it's like, yeah, it's not really about that. It's about getting those options so that I can now do more. So I'm curious. Clearly, Alex, you're an EPT. Cadey, do you consider yourself an EPT?
Yes, Alex and I are very similar. We're wired very similarly.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously when you have two EPTs, you've got a lot of similarities. One of the things that we've seen and we've even experienced ourselves is when you have one person that's that entrepreneur personality type and then the other one who's not, the way you view the world, the way you go about doing things is so different. How have you guys seen that been able to coexist, or what are some of the quote unquote secrets?
He's talking about me, by the way. Just to be clear.
Well, here's this belief I have is that in most cases, when someone has come to us and said, like, we're in a couple, but my husband's not an EPT and I am, and we work with a lot of couples that are in business and a lot of people who run businesses in a couple not working together. Mm-hmm. And I almost always I want to say, well, yeah, they are an EPT, but the fact is you're just so over the top that they don't look like it. And in any other room, that person would be the standout. But when they're with you, they don't even get noticed. And so I have this belief, or maybe like hallucination, that's usually what's going on. But here's the bottom line to any relationship, whether you're in a relationship with somebody who is a similar personality type to you or not. I think that as entrepreneurial personality types, as evolutionary hunters, we have this lens where we attract the person who's going to reflect what we need to see and hear. And that makes relationships for us incredibly hard because we literally pick the person who's going to reflect to us the things that are wrong with us. And so it makes relationships charged, to say the very least. But we always share with people there's two rules for entrepreneurial success. The first is treat your marriage as if it's the most important thing. And the second is keep transparency in your marriage absolute. And that goes for people who consider themselves entrepreneurial personality types and the spouses who don't. And if you do that, if you keep transparency in the marriage, and if you treat it like it's the most important, then you're going to have the business success you want. That's how, I coach from a place of, if people aren't willing to do that, then we won't coach them.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely just getting goosebumps hearing that, because it makes a lot of sense. And it also validates, I guess, to me, we've spent almost 11 years together now working with the real estate. We have a small retail store. We've got the online business. And some years, it has just felt like the hardest thing in the world to work together, to become parents together, to build these businesses together. And then other times it feels so incredibly easy in that it makes complete and total sense. And that concept of the person that you attract is showing you what you need to improve about yourself is just like a little light bulb going off over my head, because it's so true. And that I wasn't an entrepreneur. I didn't consider myself an entrepreneur growing up because I really didn't even think about that as a possibility. I didn't see that as an opportunity because I didn't have anyone around me to show that to me. And then when I met Tom and he started having these grand ideas, and it was like, oh, these things are possible, but wait.
He substituted grand instead of crazy, by the way.
Yes. And
that changed from a couple of years ago. It used
to be the crazy ideas. Now they're just ideas. But, it does make a lot of sense, because I needed that reflected to me, that there was this other possibility for what life could be, because otherwise I would have just spent the rest of my life going down the traditional path, as we call it, going to college, finding a job, bouncing around from job to job, maybe being okay, but never being, truly, truly happy. And for Tom, I reflect back, he used to call me the reality checker because I was like his human no button when he would come to me with a new idea. And for years, he thought that was a negative thing. But now we see that as the positive piece, because I'm checking him and making sure that he's really thought the idea through. We're putting the time in. We're validating that this is something that could be real. And I'm seeing the little gaps and the little details that he may have glossed over with his ideas of grandeur. So I absolutely love that concept, and I'm totally going to reference it all the time now, thanks to you.
Well, and Ariana, I'll add a little bit more to that. I do want to create an exception here. One of the challenges with entrepreneurial personality types is that we have a tendency to get into abusive, bad relationships. So I'm not talking about anybody who's in a relationship where if you're in a relationship where you don't feel safe, you feel invalidated, you feel put down, you feel small, you know, you're worried about what's going to happen next. You don't know how the person you're with is going to behave. You might be in an abusive relationship. And unfortunately, we attract those. You know, entrepreneurs are, especially EPTs, like you don't even have to be a business owner, but if you have the entrepreneurial personality type mindset, we see the best in people. We want the best from people. We're eternal optimists and we always think things are going to get better. And we're used to struggling. So a lot of us get into bad relationships. I was in a really abusive relationship years before I met Cadey. And so I'm not talking about them, but for the people who are in a marriage where you know it's the right marriage for you, you know you're with the right person, you know you have achieved together. Here's the bottom line. If you can't convince your spouse of an idea, you're probably doing something dumb. And if you're hiding it from your spouse, you're absolutely doing something dumb.
Yes.
And, you know, it's when we get into those entrepreneurial fantasies like, oh, this is going to be so great, I'm not going to tell anybody about it, is when we really get ourselves in trouble. And the best pressure check most entrepreneurs have is their spouse.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's been a lot of times where I've faced that argument. They're like, oh, my wife's not an EPT, she doesn't get it. And here's what's crazy. You guys will understand how nuts this is. You know, I always tell people the problem with masterminds is if you ask a question and somebody doesn't know an answer, they're probably going to give you one anyway.
Yep.
And there's this new belief being perpetuated in masterminds and in coaching groups where if your spouse doesn't support you, don't tell them what's going on.
Yeah.
No, I hate that.
It's just crazy. And you know, if you know what people are being coached to do these days is to create a lack of intimacy, a lack of transparency, and a lack of connection in their marriage. And then 6 months later, the entrepreneur is like, my wife doesn't want to be with me anymore. My husband doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Well, I wonder why. You know, if you're with someone and you're willing to take the time to sit down with them, gain their consensus and gain their support, here's what I know 99% of the time, your idea is going to work. If your spouse, if your wife, your husband's not buying in, there's probably a good reason.
I love so much the fact that you went there and said that because I've seen the same thing. And Ariana could tell when I hear somebody say that, because there's very little that fires me up more than somebody saying like, just let them go or just don't worry about that. Go all in on the business. Because we've seen it firsthand. Like the whole reason Lifestyle Builders came about was because I was coaching businesses and we'd help get them really good success. And then like a couple months later, their marriage would fall apart. And I'm like, I can't be helping a business if we're not looking at the whole life. And that was the big thing for us. And I think I love the way you articulated that, because I've been trying to get this idea across to Ariana. And I'm like, I think subconsciously I do things to make an issue come up so that we've got to work through it together. And if I look back on a lot of the tough times we've had, I think I just do something to make it that way because we get stronger out of it. But when we do this and when we see couples that have those conversations, get aligned first, put the marriage first, put the life first, and then build the business or whatever on the back of that, that's when it's so much more successful. But that idea of like, well, just don't tell them or just kind of go and do your own thing, like absolutely wrong in my opinion.
Well, and I don't know why people think it's going to be easy, because nothing about being an entrepreneur in business is easy, but they think like their spouse is automatically supposed to jump on the train when they have this aha moment that, you know, entrepreneurship is the next thing they're going to do. It took me probably 5 years to be on board with our first business. And then even after that, it was like every time something else would come up, like it takes time to get your spouse onto the same level as you if they're not in the entrepreneur's mindset. And I don't know why people think everything, like there's that easy button, like, oh, I'm just going to tell them and they're going to support me because they love me. Sure, that might happen for some people, but for a lot of us, like you need to take that time. You need to bring them on board slowly. You need to give them that time to come to terms with the idea. You need to overcome their fears, because usually fear is a big part of what's holding your spouse back from jumping in and saying 100%, you go do what you need to do. I trust that it's going to work. I trust that you're going to do what you need to. You know, it's scary. It's a different path.
Well, and fear usually is motivated by a lack of clarity. And so if your spouse isn't clear, that probably means you're not clear.
Yeah.
And if you can't explain it in a way that it makes sense to your spouse, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And so, you know, I don't know. I always revert back to the two rules, like treat your marriage as if it's most important and make sure that, you have transparency in your marriage and your spouse is supporting you and you're going to be successful.
Yeah. So how do you guys actually like operate together relationship wise and business wise? Because like one of the things we found was like when I brought Ariana into the business, like I did it completely wrong. Basically, I was overwhelmed and she just started picking up like the stuff that I was dropping. And then eventually I just started giving her the stuff I didn't like, but I didn't help her to then get into the role she wanted to be in. And it took us years to kind of figure that out. So like, how did you guys figure out like what roles you play in your relationship and like as parents as well as like in the business? How'd you figure that out?
A lot of process.
Yeah, a lot of the same business principles like that we apply to business, we have now said, okay, we're going to apply that to our family and our marriage. And so we run our marriage, we run our family, sort of like a business because it is. And we have personal team members that help us out personally. And so, we saw the parallels and we're good at business. And if we can provide a framework that will, help our family flourish and make our marriage a little bit easier, then we just decided that that's what we were going to do. And so that's what we really do. I mean, you said the word alignment, and for us to stay aligned, like we have to take the time and it has to become it has to be a practice. And so that's what we've done. And we've gotten better at saying like, hey, this is where I'm uncomfortable, and supporting each other when we are.
All of Katie's crazy ideas.
And then also, I think we say like process in a marriage isn't sexy, but you end up having a lot more sex. And so, because people are like, wait, you have like meetings with your spouse? And we're like, yeah, we do. We sit down and we align and we understand where we're going and we have clarity as to how we're going to get there so we can support each other. And we can like maybe forecast where there might be hangups that we need to work through.
And I'm like an obsessive researcher. So when we got married, I'm like, oh crap, this is so much harder than anything I've ever done. And so I started like trying to figure out who to read and who to understand about relationships. And most stuff that's written about relationships is really garbage. Mm-hmm. It's terrible. But there is some standouts. And one of them is John Gottman. Yep. And I read and internalized a lot of his stuff. It's freaking amazing. It's amazing for business. Yeah, that book is a game changer. Yeah. But I recommend that as a business book. People are like, but it's a marriage book. Nope, it's a business book. If you read that, you'll run your business better. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the things that cause issues in a marriage, there's huge arguments over money. There's huge arguments over time. There's huge arguments over like communication. And so what we did was we built systems so that those arguments don't exist. So we have a meeting around money and we have an understanding around money that's really hyper clear. We have a ton of like scheduled communication that's part of a process that you can't back out of. Like the only time we miss it is usually when we're traveling and stuff, but both of us end up like out of whack for a week if we miss it. Mm-hmm. And then, so we eliminate the major arguments. So we talk about net worth all the time. And I tell people, talk about net worth, because if you're driving a net worth number, you're going to have the money conversation. You eliminate the number one argument. If you schedule communications, you eliminate the number two argument. We don't talk and communicate enough. Yep. And so, I took Gottman's principles and backed them into process and systems, or we took Gottman's principles and backed them into process. And that's a game changer, because when you look at why most marriages fail, there's like a very clear list of stuff. So if you just handle that list of stuff, you're probably not going to fail.
Yeah. Well, that was, because I love when you guys first said that, because we kind of went about it a different way, but we got to the same point, which was I looked at how I was helping businesses succeed with the money, the communication, the time. And then I said, well, if the principles there work, that'll probably work in our relationship. And I remember when I first started bringing home like, hey, babe, we should have like a daily sync to make sure we're on the same page. Or like we should do like a 90-day planning session to say, where are we at and where do we want to go next? It seemed crazy at first, but it's made such a difference for us.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I think we might have froze.
Just pause the recording quick. It's such a good conversation.
I knew it would be.
Mm-hmm.
They might have heard everything you just said, by the way.
I know. I figure I'll jump back. Well, when they froze, that was kind of my concern. I figured I'd just keep going with it. And if they didn't respond, we could...
Yay! I was like, uh-oh, I think we froze. I don't think you heard any of what Tom was saying.
What
did you?
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay.
No. Okay. Uh-oh. I don't think we can hear you. I think you might be...
No, we can't hear you now.
You're muted.
Did you
Oh,
get
sorry.
what Alex-
Oh, there we go.
There we
Okay.
go.
All right, I'll just kick back in right after you guys got done.
Okay.
So I love the fact that you said that, because I think we ended up at a very similar place to like what you guys do, but we came about it from a different perspective. And basically I was looking at, like, I would go into businesses and help them release products faster, build high performing teams. And then I had to work with the leaders to figure out how to be better leaders, how to communicate. And I said, if these work in the businesses I'm working with, they'll probably work at home. So I started saying, like, I remember I said, hey babe, I think you should like start having a daily sync to get synced up on like what's going on. And then we can have like a weekly meeting to reflect and see like what's going well, what's not, where do you need support, what should we do next week? And then we could do like a monthly where we talk about the money, and then quarterly where we do goals. And she looked at me like,
I thought
what
it was
are you talking
crazy
about?
again.
But that is now the foundation of like how we run. And we do that for our personal life and our business. And I'll tell you, it's made all the difference in the world. And we've just found that using those underlying principles that work in business and in life.
Well, and the same with you. Anytime we like miss one of our weekly sync
I can
meetings,
feel it.
it's automatic. Like, okay, where are we? We lost each other. We've got to come back and find, that home base again so that we can be at a good place. Because once we're out of alignment, things in the business start going out as well. Things at home start going out as well. So, I mean, it's been essential for us to really carve out that time for the communication, for the money talk specifically, for, kind of any issues that are happening at home, in the business. It's really been kind of a saving grace for us.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. Entrepreneurs are willing to apply process to just about anything in a business if they feel like it's successful, and then they expect their marriage to just work on its own.
Right? It's harder sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's way harder.
It's much harder because there's a lot of, I think most entrepreneurs are more comfortable and more confident when it comes to business than they are in interpersonal relationships and like, things that are emotional. So, and you see that a lot. Like when stress gets high, the entrepreneur will dive into their business, and they're working really long hours, and they're not communicating with their spouse, and they're not saying like, hey, this is what's going on, and this is where I'm uncomfortable, and this is where I'm having challenges.
Yep.
When if they would just turn to their spouse and start creating alignment and creating better understanding, then they would have that pressure and noise release, and they would have alignment and support at home. So I forget the point that I was making, but
You totally made
it
it.
was epic.
Well, I was going to say, and what we found too, to your point about entrepreneurs being okay with it business-wise, but not personal, like we've always found it funny that entrepreneurs will go and hire business coaches and sales coaches and everything else, but they don't do that same with their relationship. And like one of the things we did this year, we said we want to put ourselves first. Like we put everyone else first for far too long. We're going to put ourselves first. And, we started going to a marriage therapist, and it was one of the best things ever. And like, we never saw it as taboo. And she actually said, she's like, you guys are doing this right. You're coming when things are good and you want to make them better rather than waiting until like everything's terrible. And now there's so much work to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. We totally advocate for couples work in any capacity and have done it for years. Still do it today.
Yeah, and I think adding kids into the mix. I mean, like marriage is hard enough on its own, just the two of you. Then you add the entrepreneurship piece, which again, hard. Then you add parenting and bringing up kids, and there's just so many complexities and things that happen in life that you aren't prepared for that now get thrown into the mix on top of that. And I think as parents, you always want to put the kids first. You always want your kids to be healthy and happy. And because of that, oftentimes the marriage ends up being at the bottom of the priority list, because obviously you want the business to be running, you want the income to be okay, the kids are okay, you're taking care of yourself maybe, but not taking care of the marriage. And that's definitely something that we wanted to shift this year, put back into the forefront and say, okay, everything else needs to run smoothly and we're going to focus on us.
It's good that you said that. And I also agree, because I think that if I say this to parents a lot, and parents who are entrepreneurs, because if you can model that your marriage comes first to your kids, that's modeling a healthy marriage. Mm-hmm. That's modeling that this is a priority and that when they're older, then their marriage is a priority. And it's okay. And it's actually the best thing that you can do, not only for your marriage, but also for your children and your family. So by making the marriage number one, you're making your family number one. Because if the marriage doesn't work, the family doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So true. Okay. We have covered so many amazing topics today. And I know you guys have had a couple one-liners that I'm definitely going to go back and listen to pull out. But is there anything else that you particularly would love listeners to take away from today's show?
Just about business and marriage, Ariana?
Yeah. Yep. Anything that you want them to specifically take away, like an action step or one piece of advice?
I think that we've already said it several times. It's really two foundational things that we coach on. One is, I call them the 2 rules for entrepreneurial success, not for marriage success, but for entrepreneurial success. Treat your marriage as if it's most important, and then maintain absolute transparency in your marriage. And the second one is what Katie said, process in a marriage may not be sexy, but you'll end up having a lot more sex. And we kind of say that jokingly, but it's totally true. It's funny. A friend of mine here in Austin treats Michael Dell. He has a rehab facility, and Dell's coming in for some pretty advanced work and getting better shape. And he asked Michael Dell, he's like, hey, what would you tell somebody like me just starting out to be successful? And Michael Dell said, treat your marriage as if it's most important, and everything else will work out. And, that's where it comes from for me. I spent time around really crazy successful people, and the happiest ones that I ever met were the ones who put their marriage first. And it didn't matter if the company was worth 100 million or multiple billions, they put their marriage first. Dave Linegar, who became a close friend of ours, who recently retired from Remax, Gail Linegar was with him every single day. She's in there in the office. She's on stage with him at conventions. They ran that business together, and Dave would give her credit for the whole thing. And so, I think the model that really works is make your marriage incredibly important, and everything else will work itself out.
I love that. All right. And best place for people to find you. I know you're on social and you've got a podcast, all this awesome stuff. Where's the best place for them to reach out and find you?
So there's a couple places. One is the Momentum podcast. It's a first-person podcast that I've been doing. It's been out for about 14 months, 13 or 14 months. We've just crossed 1.1 million downloads, which is pretty awesome. You can go to momentumpodcast.com, and we have it on all of the different sites. So Google, Stitcher, iTunes, anywhere you want to listen to it.
Usually
and
it's
then,
on Tom's
what was that?
I said usually it's on in Tom's car when I get in.
I don't listen to very many podcasts anymore, but that is one of them.
I appreciate it, Tom. And the second place is if anybody relates to that concept of being an entrepreneurial personality type, you can go to freemomentumbook.com. We're actually giving the book away right now. You pay for shipping and handling, and we'll send it out to you for free. It usually takes a day or two to get to you, but freemomentumbook.com. Those are probably the 2 best places. And then for anybody who's on Facebook, we have a Facebook group called the Billionaire Code. And if you're growing a business, in a marriage, growing a family, that's a great place to get more information too.
I love it. And we will make sure all of those links that Alex just mentioned are on the show notes page at tomandariana.com/96. All right, you guys, it's been another amazing episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders. And we want to extend a huge thank you to you, Alex and Cadey, for coming on the show and just sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and real experience stories with us today.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. We appreciate the invite and for spending the time with you today.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, I want you guys to remember that it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. And just a reminder, as a special offer during this super special Couples in Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. Sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the promo code LBcouples. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.